You want to know what's interesting?
Go for it.
I was actually born ready. So there we go.
Oof.
Hey, let's go.
There it is. There it is.
Literally popped out and the doctor said he looks ready.
Came out with thumbs up.
Throw him on a podcast. He is the one thing.
Came out with the mic.
Oh, crap. All right. So super excited for this podcast. Welcome to listeners. I hope we get to keep that little intro spontaneity there. So today we have a very, very special guest. This is Geoff Woods, and I will read his bio. That will definitely not do him justice, but hopefully the podcast itself will. Geoff Woods is the co-founder and president of Productive, the training company behind The One Thing, and the host of the One Thing podcast, which is in the top 5% of all podcasts in the world. So if you haven't heard of him, I don't know where you're living, but anyways, probably under a rock. Geoff is an advisor to executives ranging from small business owners to Fortune 500 CEOs, helping them design the future of work and create cultures where people are clear on what matters most so they achieve extraordinary results. And probably couldn't have written a better bio that goes in relation to Beyond the Peak and what we're about. But nonetheless, Geoff Woods, thank you for being here, brother.
My pleasure. Excited about this.
Yeah.
Excited to dive in, my man.
So this first question is pretty intense, I got to tell you. It's basically, I saw this video of you and I didn't realize this was true for you. And I wonder if others know this too. Apparently, you're quite the jump roper.
Oh, you're going there. You said video and I'm going, oh man, where's he going with this?
And here's the thing that I know about jump ropers, because I've met one before that was quite serious. And like, a serious jump roper is serious. Like there's no like in between. You're either like, yeah, I can skip a rope, or like it's going down. And so I'd love to hear
hold
your
on
story
one second. Let's just prove a point.
In case you're just listening and not watching, he has now left the room. He is probably going to come back with the
probably
jump rope.
Getting a jump rope.
Please hold.
All righty. So let's look at the bag of goodies. So this is the black one is my speed rope. The neon yellow one is another speed rope. The teal one's a 1/4 pound rope. The white is a 1/2 pound. This gray one is a full pound. And ready for the black mamba, the 2 pound rope with a steel bar in the middle.
Wow, this is so awesome. I knew this was going to be a great question. Okay, you got to tell me some more about how you got so serious about jump rope. And I didn't even know there were different kinds in that kind of way. So I'd love to get into that a little bit, because this might be my next workout.
So growing up, I did martial arts for, 15, 18 years and was very into nunchucks. I also have a dancing background. So during college, I was a professional hip hop dancer. So you put martial arts plus dance together, you literally get jump roping. It works. So you have the side swings of like nunchucks while listening to music and a certain beat and fancy footwork. And it's a nice blend of the two. But I remember it was when I was in college, I just started practicing. And I got to the point where, I could just jump steadily for maybe a minute. But then I saw a woman in the gym one day busting some moves.
Oh my God.
I've never approached a woman in the gym in my life until that day. And but not for what most men approach for. I approached for guidance on how to jump rope. And that's when she started giving me some feedback, and I just started practicing it. And when you can go from skipping just single skips really fluidly to being able to do side swings, swinging it from side to side and transitioning that back and forth, that is literally the 20% that unlocks 80% of the moves.
Damn.
Wow.
And so I started studying videos, and I mean, I've just been very purposeful about it. And now I look like Floyd Mayweather.
This is great.
That is amazing.
And it's highly productive. It is way more efficient of a workout than running and way lower impact. So there you go.
Interesting.
I can literally break a sweat in less than 5 minutes.
100%. The guy that I was talking about, he literally wanted to like have a competition with me, go out to the parking lot. He's like, hey, don't worry, I got an extra one for you. Let's just do it. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean compete? And you want to just go for as long as possible with as many jumps, or I don't know. Anyway, so good to know. Good to know.
I've got a few buddies. I've done some training for military and special forces, and I've got a few buddies who thought they were pretty good, and they sent me some videos, and then I sent them a few back. and then they
Oh my
stop
God, I
sending
need those videos.
That's I could just imagine that setup, Geoff, where you're going into, military special training organizations and you're like, guys, I have a workout for you. I hope y'all are ready. And you come in with a box of jump ropes.
Oh yeah. I just did a training for a bunch of Green Berets and Army Rangers, and we did a workout together that morning. But that afternoon I held up the ropes. I said, I challenge anybody to a jump off. And nobody took me up on it.
Love it. Okay. Well, I think that was an awesome icebreaker into the conversation. We're going to talk about a lot of things here, but the next sort of place I'd love to take this, Geoff, is I'd love to ask you, what you would say is the one thing to help people go beyond the peak in their life. And, our viewers know what that means, but share with us, what you would say is the one thing to really go beyond the peak in your life.
At the core of my understanding of what it means to go beyond the peak is it's not just about achieving professional success. It's about having holistic fulfillment. I think what stops people from achieving that is a lack of clarity. I think most people listening to this show are probably pretty ambitious, pretty driven. And if you ask them what their goals are and ask them to write them down, my hypothesis is you would see a lot of professional goals, income or wealth building type goals, and experiential type goals. Like I want to go on these types of vacations, or I want to have this type of a house or this type of an investment portfolio. My sense is you would probably not see them describing what a thriving marriage looks like, what deep connection with their children looks like, what meaningful spirituality looks like. They may have some health goals. I would perceive that. But what does a thriving personal life look like? If they were just crushing hobbies, what would it look like? I don't think most people have that level of clarity. And the reason I can say that is because that used to be me. Prior to co-founding this company, all of my goals were about business, income, materialistic things, and health. But one of the first things my partner said to me is, if you want to be the face of the one thing, you have to live the book or you're fired.
I love that.
Literally. And on page 114, there's the 7 circles. It's the 7 most important areas of life: your spirituality, your physical health, your personal life, your key relationships, your job, your business, and your finances. And what's easy about this is it's easy for ambitious people to focus on job, business, finance, but those are rubber balls. If you drop the rubber ball, what happens? Bounces back, right?
100%.
Spirituality, physical health, personal life, key relationships, those are glass balls. You drop a glass ball, it's scuffed or it shatters. And there's a lot of people that are so focused on trying to keep the rubber balls up in the air that they don't realize that the glass balls are falling. And so to recap, I think the one thing that's required is they actually have to sit down and actually get clarity about what their goals are for their life. Then you can start asking the question, how do we put a plan in place to achieve them?
That's powerful, man. I love the analogy on how those areas of your life are glass balls, and if you drop them, you break. And I feel like for so many people, they only realize it's broken far too long after they've already broken it. And after it's already shattered in pieces. And I'm wondering, Geoff, if you'd be able to share a story with our audience. I know you said this is the way you used to live, where you used to live, about the success and the money and the health, but those other areas of life, those were not the things you were thinking about. And would you be able to share a story where you were either about to, or you did shatter the glass ball and you had to pivot and learn from it and shift to a direction that was more holistically embodied?
Yeah, well, anybody who is married or who has kids would like to say that family comes first. But the truth is, I was showing up in the world as a businessman with a family, not a family man with a business.
Front row dads.
There it is. Yeah. For me, it took realizing that this was in my journey of living the one thing, that I was not being as purposeful in my relationships with my wife or my children as I was in my relationship with my business and my employees. And I had to go on a journey there. I've had to form very intentional habits to become more of a family man with a business rather than showing up as a businessman with a family. I am by far from perfect. And I'm light years better than I used to be. I mean, it can be as simple as knowing that when I'm about to walk through that door in my home office, pausing, taking a breath, visualizing myself walking in and seeing my kids and actually shifting from work to personal mode, from executive Geoff to husband and father Geoff, because they're very different roles and they're very different speeds. Business is like you're in a freaking sports car tearing up the track. And then, sometimes switching to family mode can feel like you get out of that sports car and get into a tugboat. It's not even close, just the pace, the level of stimulation. Yet deep down, one's far more meaningful than the other, even if it may not be as stimulating in the moment. And that's been a journey I've been on for years.
Powerful. I love that. There's a lot of really important things. And one of the things that I liked about the boat analogy is it makes me think of the quote, slow down to the speed of wisdom, right? Because there's some people that might hear this whole like, oh, the speed of business sounds like it's like due to that speed, more difficult or challenging or more impactful or whatever. And as though slowing down may be correlating to less, right? Less speed might be less things. However, I think the clear argument is really, no, it's slowing down because it requires almost more attention, more presence, more sensing and feeling of things at this sort of different pace. So I think that that's very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I was having a conversation with my business partner, Jay Papazan, and he said, leadership is often about meeting people where they're at versus where you think they ought to be. That was a tough pill for me to swallow because I have extremely high standards. I move faster than everybody else in our company. And I'm constantly seeing the gap between where people are and where I want them to be. And he just said, you as a leader have to learn how to meet people where they're at versus where they ought to be. And then that landed with me. And then all of a sudden, my wife's having the conversation with me about you walk in the door and you're running at a certain speed and you expect everybody to match your energy. You're coming in, you're on fire because you had this awesome day. You've got all this energy. You put your stuff down. You want hugs right then, right there. You want people to be greeting you with energy. And she goes, and what you didn't see is that we just had a massive meltdown. And that all I actually need you to do is to walk in with a calm energy, put your bag down and come and ask how you can help. Versus daddy's home. Who's ready to hug daddy? That's not the energy that they were looking for.
Yeah,
totally.
So powerful. I remember just recently I came home in similar experience as you, Geoff, where, I started sharing all my wins and celebrations of the day. It was a great business day. We landed a client and I'm talking to my fiance, sharing all these things with her. And what I didn't realize in sharing them, or what I didn't attune to by not being in the present moment, was that she actually had a really hard day. And
she wasn't ready to receive your celebration.
She needed someone to hold space for her because it was a very difficult day for her. And it was only afterwards when I, when I gave her space to speak, did I realize that most of what I just said just flew out the window anyway, because what she needed is for someone to slow down, be present with her and hear what happened. But because of my celebration successes, I didn't get to be there for her in that beautiful moment.
That's right.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned too, you mentioned Jay Papasan and a huge part of your story is mentorship, all that kind of stuff, right? I think that's probably an understatement. But one of the questions, and it came up in Justin Donald's podcast, actually, which I think is mentioned often, is Gary Keller, and how one of the key things he mentored you on was thinking bigger, right? And very importantly, how thinking bigger helped you eliminate complacency. I really wanted to hear from you, what are some practical ways to actually think bigger? What does it mean to think bigger? How do you actually do it? How do you not get stuck in it too as well and bring it back to a grounding now kind of thing, right? I'd love to sort of get your concepts on that.
So we have to give some context. So if you're familiar with Keller Williams, the real estate company, Gary Keller Williams. Gary's the co-founder of KW, the chairman of the board. He literally started the company in Austin, tiny little real estate company. It's now the largest real estate company in the world, 200,000 plus people. And he's done just fine for himself financially.
A little bit.
He and his co-author, Jay Papasan, is his writing partner. So they write all their books together. They wrote The One Thing, which is now one of the highest rated business books of all time. When I was interviewing for the role to start the company, I remember having dinner with Jay and his wife, Wendy, and I asked them, what's the biggest gift you've gotten being in business with Gary? And they both, like, without hesitation, thinking bigger. And what they meant by that is every single one of us, when we set goals, when we think about what's possible, we reach a level where our mind says that's no longer possible, where your mind says, okay, that's it. Gary has an ability to take that and freaking stretch it beyond what you could even perceive imaginable. And he does it by asking really simple questions. One of my other business partners, another business that we have ownership in, is a coaching company. And he asked Abe to put together a pro forma for the business. And he told Abe, think big. Abe came back with a business plan to get the business to $100 million a year, which, by the way, like, when you hear that, you might think that's crazy big. Some of you might go, whatever. Most businesses fail. If a business can get to 10 million a year, you're in like rare air. 100 million, you got to be kidding me. He sits down, and it took serious brain power to put that plan in place. He showed it to Gary, and Gary said, why'd you stop at 100 million? And Abe said, what are you talking about? He said, this is good work. I want you to come back and bring me a plan for $1 billion. Abe did it. Same thing happened with The One Thing. Gary asked Jay, because Jay he was a editor at HarperCollins, major New York publisher. And he said, Jay, how many copies would we have to sell in order to hit the New York Times? And Jay said, we'd probably have to sell about 40,000 copies in our first week. For context, the average business book sells about 500 copies in its lifetime, because that's all your friends and family will buy. You have to sell 40,000 in a week. So Jay comes back with a plan to sell 40,000 copies in a week, which racked his brain to get there. And Gary said, dude, if your plan's for 40,000, how often do plans go according to plan? Never. So what you just showed me is a plan to fail. You need to show me a plan to get to 100,000 copies in a week. That like almost crushed Jay's soul, but he did it. He came back with a plan for 100,000 copies. Guess how many copies The One Thing sold in the first week?
68,000.
44,000.
Damn, close.
Wow.
Wall Street Journal, New York Times bestseller.
Wow.
But
Amazing.
it's just an example of every single one of us, our brain stops at some point where we go, that is no longer possible. The difference coming from Gary is it's not that he's just asking you bigger questions that force you to stretch your mind. He's actually done it. So there's validity behind what he's asking because he's actually done it.
That actually interesting. That prompts a question for me then. So, because the simplicity and power of what you said is it's just about asking the questions, but then you added an interesting sort of caveat to, but they're much more powerful, quote unquote, because he's done it. So I guess the question I'm wondering then is if someone has not done it to that capacity, how can they elevate them to be able to ask those kinds of questions?
Well, it's like when the 4-minute mile got broken. Nobody thought it was possible until it was. And once it had been broken, a bunch of other people broke it within 12 months because they realized, oh, it's not just a pipe dream. This is doable. So there's something about, if you haven't done it before, I think this is where that Jim Rohn quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, comes in. You start surrounding yourself. You don't have to have done it. But if you surround yourself with people who have walked the path, who have had the success, who have made the failures and mistakes, you can learn from their validity. And that's what's happened in being in relationship with Jay and Gary, is they've just collapsed time for me. I mean, if you want to go and start a company and you want to figure everything out on your own, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. It's going to take a lot longer. But I've got, between Gary and Jay, oh man, over 60, 65 years of business ownership experience at a pretty freaking high level that got handed to me on a silver plate from day one in terms of this is how you approach it. This is how you handle these situations. They collapsed 65 years for me.
Yeah, I love that. I think this is actually a hilariously perfect transition for a question about, because you said, oh, came on a silver plate. And people might think like, oh, Geoff, you had it easy. You got it on a silver plate. And we all know that that's not true. Would love to hear the story of how you were able to get yourself to even receive that silver plate.
Yeah.
Because it's a pretty valuable one.
I was in medical device sales, which was a great job. I woke up every day running through hospitals, selling a device to save lives. But deep down, even though things were good, I was lacking fulfillment. Problem is, life was good enough. It was good enough that I didn't have enough pain to compel me to take action. Two things happened. A colleague of mine has a stroke at 35. My wife and I buy a house in Orange County, have our first child. Wife decides to become a stay-at-home mom. And I'm sitting in my kitchen going, holy smokes. If what happened to my colleague had happened to me, what happens to my family? Next week, my company needs to make a change to our commission structure to remain competitive in the marketplace. Right move for the business. I took a 40% pay cut overnight. Now, for anybody who has had a pay cut or a job loss, that can rock you, especially when you're the sole provider and proud owner of a big fat mortgage in Orange County, California. Yeah. I learned another lesson in that moment, which is letting your lifestyle rise to meet a level of income. And when that level of income changes, your lifestyle does not automatically adjust, especially if that income goes down. Yeah. And that's where we found ourselves hemorrhaging cash month after month. And it gets to the point that we're almost out of money. And I'm wondering, how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to pay the lease on the cars? And as somebody whose identity is wrapped up in being a provider, I was crushing. And that's when I heard, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And for the first time, I actually took out a pen and paper, wrote down the names of the 5 people I spent the most time with, and saw the names of 5 amazing people, amazing friends. But that was the aha moment. I had 5 amazing friends. I didn't have any amazing mentors yet. Yeah. I didn't have anybody in my life who had already built a business that made a big impact in the world and delivered security for their family. But that was my dream. And so that became abundantly clear. If I want to become that type of person, I have to surround myself with those types of people. My friends are still my friends, by the way, but I had to start surrounding myself with the right mentors. And you fast forward, it's our national sales meeting. I walk into the ballroom and Jay Papasan was the keynote speaker talking about the one thing. And the whole time he's talking, I'm going, oh man, what would my life be like if a guy like Jay or Gary were one of my 5? And then all the limiting beliefs seep in, like,
yep.
What could you say to them to make them interested in you? What could you give them to make it worth your time?
You're not good enough.
Right. But when Jay finished speaking, he gets a standing ovation. Everybody else sits down and I'm standing. It was one of those moments where my mind was telling me to do one thing, but my heart was pulling me in a different direction. My mind said, Geoff, sit down. My heart said, run. And before you know it, I'm quite literally sprinting down the side of the ballroom. And I was the first person to talk to Jay. And that's what opened the door. What I was unaware of was that the one thing had already become one of the highest rated business books of all time. And that created a problem. You know the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire outside of their net worth?
No.
A millionaire sees an opportunity and asks, how can I do it? A billionaire sees an opportunity and asks, who can do this inside my world?
That is huge.
Yep.
So the book takes off and they go, this is a company. But Gary goes, my one thing's Keller Williams. And Jay said, I can do it. And Gary said, no, you can't. Your one thing is writing books with me. Go find somebody that we can bring into our world whose one thing is the one thing.
Powerful.
And that became my opportunity. That's how we got into business together.
And funny thing, Geoff, here around the mindset of, hey, I can't be in their circle or I can't be friends with them. I remember you saying on Justin Donald's podcast that even when they said that they needed someone, initially you didn't think of yourself. You
No.
thought of other people.
Yeah.
And then you found out that it was something that you could do.
Yeah. So when I started surrounding myself with people who are where I wanted to be, I noticed a distinct difference in how they approached conversations with people. Most people, when they're networking, they're not listening to what you're saying. They're sizing up if you can help them. And if they don't perceive that you can help them immediately, they're looking over your shoulder for the next person to talk to. That was me. But when I started surrounding myself with people who were actually successful, they were present in the conversation. They made you feel like the most important person in the room. And I remember the first time somebody said to me, out of everything you're focusing on, where do you need help most right now? How might I be able to help you? And I'm putting this person on a pedestal. It's like, how can you help me? But if you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, if you become who you surround yourself with, I started modeling that behavior. So when I cornered Jay, I asked him, out of everything you and Gary are focusing on, where do you need help most right now? How might I be able to help you? And he said, we're looking for more exposure for the book. He had no idea that I had started a podcast at the time called The Mentee. I was the mentee recording private conversations with my mentors. The podcast was in the top 20% of all podcasts in the world. And I told him about it and said, I'd be happy to interview. He goes, oh my God, that'd be amazing. I'm like,
Yes.
Oh, you think it'd be amazing? Okay, cool. Let's talk. And at the end of the episode, I asked him, out of everything you and Gary are focused on right now, where do you need help most right now? How might I be able to help? And he said, we're looking for more exposure. I said, well, I happen to have relationships with some of the top podcasters in the world. I'd be happy to get you on their shows. He's like, oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. And so I sent the emails, I got them booked, and I followed up a month later. What are you focusing on? How can I help? More exposure. He had no idea that I was writing for entrepreneur.com at the time. So I just wrote an article, blasted it, started tagging him and Gary on all social platforms. And I saw him share one of my posts. And so I commented back to him, what are you focusing on? How can I help? 4th time I've asked. 0 times have I asked for anything in return. That 4th time, he said, we're looking for a publishing CEO for a new company we want to start. And I thought of 3 people that I had come into relationship with. I didn't think it was me. I'm not a publishing CEO. I'm McDreamy. I put on scrubs and try to sell stuff.
I think most entrepreneurs have been there.
Right. But when we got on the phone, he didn't describe the people I thought of. He described me. And that's how the door got open.
When that happened, when he started describing you, was there a part of you that didn't want to say you? Was there a part of you that didn't want to say your name? Like, what was that?
Here's exactly how it went down. He's describing me and I'm going, holy crap, it's me. And so I did what every ambitious,
sounds like Christmas,
hungry person would do. I said, can I call you back? I sat in my car in silence for about 5 minutes, which has never happened ever again. I have 2 speeds, fast forward and off. And I walked into my house, looked at my wife and said, I just had a conversation and I bet everything's about to change. I wouldn't be surprised if we moved to Texas.
Wow.
And she said, wait, what? And I said, hold on. And I ran and grabbed my microphone in my office. I knew I had to document the moment. I knew it was a defining moment in my life. That became episode 57 of The Mentee. I literally documented, you hear the audio of me documenting that, to me about to go and resign from my job, to us getting on a plane on a one-way ticket from Orange County to Austin, Texas.
Wow. Is this findable right now? Like, can we include a
episode 57 of The Mentee? It's
okay. We're definitely adding that in here. That
podcast ended up being me recording private conversations with my mentors, documenting my journey going from employee to entrepreneur. Took 10 months.
So unique. What an awesome podcast. So if someone is in our audience right now and they are, they have mentor, or they have someone that they aspire to be a mentor, or someone that they aspire to mentor them, would you recommend trying to find a way to get in front of them and ask them how to provide value in their life? How would you recommend really shifting your circle to be surrounded by those influential people?
So this was the whole, started a business based on The Mentee that I later sold. It was all based on this. Let me give you the 20% that drives the 80%. You want to find a mentor? First, you have to get clarity. Are you noticing a theme here?
Yeah, clarity.
A little bit.
A mentor serves you best in their area of expertise. Perfect example. If you want to get into real estate investing, approaching somebody who's mastered the stock market is not the right mentor for you.
Yeah. Makes sense.
If you are struggling in your marriage, approaching a really successful entrepreneur who sucks at marriage is not the right entrepreneur for you or the right mentor for you. So you first and foremost have to ask the question, where do I need help right now? If I could only get mentorship in one area right now, what would it be? You have to start there. Because once you have that clarity, then you go hunting. Few things. One, best place to meet people is where they're already hanging out. So I started asking the question, what are the events, the meetups, the groups that these people are a part of? The type of people I wanted to surround myself with, the fastest path there was joining masterminds. So I had to make an investment in myself. And this is when we were almost out of money.
Powerful.
I had to make an investment in myself to get in the room. Well worth it. Well worth it. That has been one of the best ROIs I've ever gotten. The other is playing 6 degrees of separation. You guys familiar with 6 degrees of separation?
That you're only 6 degrees of separation to anyone in the world.
Anyone, literally. How often do you have a conversation where somebody asks, David, what's up? What's new? What's going on?
Like almost 90% of the conversations that I have.
And what is a common answer? What's new?
Nothing much.
Not
I hate that response.
much. What a terrible answer.
Yep.
And it's a terrible answer because you're wasting an opportunity. I realize if people asked what's going on, what's up, what's new, I should probably answer that question honestly. I've gotten clarity that I want to get into. At the time, it was real estate investing, and I am looking to surround myself with successful commercial real estate investors. That was my answer. And then I shut my mouth. Now, when I said I'm looking to surround myself with successful commercial real estate investors, what just happened in both of your minds?
Started thinking about successful real estate investors.
Who do you know who's a successful real estate investor? Because is it better to give or to receive?
It feels better to give.
Feels better to give. Receive. When you can make an introduction to somebody, it actually feels good. Makes you feel special. Makes you feel important. And what I realized is when I started just opening my mouth and saying who I was looking to surround myself with, you can't help it. Automatically, people start searching their Rolodex in their mind. And if they come up with somebody, they will say something about it.
That is so awesome.
So crazy story. Very first time this ever happened. I sat down in front of somebody who I perceived to be a very heavy hitter, somebody who was very successful in my mind. First conversation, and he asked me, so what's going on in your life? And I said, I have gotten clarity that I want to get into real estate investing, and I am looking to surround myself with successful commercial real estate investors. And this guy looks at me and says, you know what? You should come to my house tomorrow night. I have a guy who's going to be there that I want you to meet.
Wow.
And I drove down to San Diego to meet with this guy, and he's inviting me to his house. And I'm like, yes, I will be there tomorrow afternoon. I will drive back down. And that's when he introduced me to his friend. It turns out this guy was very unassuming. And I'm like, who is this guy?
Those are the best.
Nothing impressive about him. Come to find out, he's done over 10,000 commercial real estate deals. And he happened to take a liking to me. And about 6 months in, an opportunity came in for me to invest in a commercial building on the East Coast. So an opportunity that I would have never have had before became available, and the chance to learn from somebody who had done it at a very high level, because one time I told somebody who I was looking to meet, and this has happened a lot.
Damn.
So let me recap. Step 1, get clarity on where you need help. Step 2, I would start looking at what events can you start attending that you can get in the room with people. Because the moment you're in the room, there's a perceived leveling of the playing field. I would strongly recommend not trying to take a selfie with people. You put them on a pedestal, they'll treat you like they're on a pedestal over you. Treat them like a peer. And 4, start telling people when people ask what's going on, what's new, what's up, actually answer it honestly. You'd be amazed at how fast people are willing to open up their Rolodex.
Genius. I love it. Thank you so much, Geoff. That was amazing.
Yeah, I love the simplicity of it, of course, making those potentially complex ideas into simple step-by-steps, powerful. And I'm a
I've
huge
learned that
advocate.
from Gary.
Yeah, I'm sure actually with his big visions, he has to keep it that simple for others to actually like be able to follow, basically.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and I'm a huge advocate for the whole like not much thing. I literally call people forward on the spot. I'm like, what does that actually mean to you? Right? And try to get something real to come out.
Yeah.
So I love that.
I typically say a lot.
I typically give a real answer.
Yeah.
A lot. A lot. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, hey, this definitely leads me to another really good transition. So this is like great success story kind of thing, but I would love to hear about a more recent loss or failure. Because the reality is, I think some people, we're talking about pedestals and whatnot. It's easy for someone to see someone like you, for example, and say, hey, man, Geoff's got it figured out. This guy doesn't have business problems or things like that. I'd love to hear, what's been a failure that's come up recently and how did it maybe turn into a phenomenal lesson?
And this could be any direction. Sorry, Oliver. This could be any area of your life as well. It doesn't have to be just
of course.
The one that's most top of mind for me, I'll share because I think it's probably the problem that is most universal, which is letting your lifestyle rise to meet an income level.
Mm-hmm.
If you read Rich Dad Poor Dad or played the cash flow game, it's about fixing a lifestyle on a number.
Yep.
And when there's surplus, investing until you have the passive income to cover your lifestyle, then you raise your lifestyle as you raise your passive income. So you are always financially free. Super simple idea, very seldomly done.
Oh, emotionally, very hard to do.
Yeah. I told myself when my colleague had the stroke and my income gets slashed by 40% that I would never be there again. We moved to Austin. We start this company. I take a big step back in terms of income. I mean, startup entrepreneur, you're not rolling in the Benjamins. It took 4 years to get our income back to where it was when I was in medical sales.
Wow.
And then we did it again. We let our lifestyle rise to meet a level of income. And Jay said to me one day, he said, how can you expect us to trust you with the finances of the business if you can't manage the finances of your personal life?
Wow.
That's heavy for sure.
Which is interesting because a lot of executives are great at running a budget for a business, but they suck at doing it for their personal lives. That is super common. So I am not alone. But it just went to show that I didn't learn the lesson. My wife and I had not yet learned how to live a lifestyle based on a budget, whether that's a big budget or a small budget. But that's the skill, how to form a lifestyle based on a number and to start investing the difference. And we're at the point now where we make too much money to be house poor. We make too much money to feel strain. And I'm not saying that those things are happening for us, but I don't believe that I can say we have mastered the ability to live a lifestyle based on a budget yet. And for me, that's a massive failure, because how many times do I have to learn the lesson before we actually learn the lesson?
Yeah.
That actually hits beautifully home for me. And I'm so happy you said that, because I'm definitely, David and I, we recently actually got laid off from the same organization together. It's why we launched this business together at the same time. It was quite serendipitous. But as we're going to be growing our income, I'm really going to hold on to that. And I'm sure David and I are probably going to talk about that on our own personal development call together that we have weekly. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah. Perfect timing.
And one of the things that I've done is I've invited Jay into my personal life. I don't want him just to coach me professionally. I want him to coach me personally. He knows my net worth. He knows it every single month. He knows how much I make, and he can do the math to figure out how much we're spending. And I show him the graphs of our spending. And we did an audit 4 months ago where I did a track record of what our expenses were the last 6 months by category. And he had me go through and say, which of these are absolute necessities, which of these are wants, and which of these are luxuries, and color code it and have the honest conversation about what are you going to do differently.
Amazing. I kind of wanted to take this in a direction, and David, feel free to cut this question, but I'm like, oh man, I feel this needs to be asked is, how the hell do you bring that conversation to your wife in a way that she will very openly receive
and
that?
To give you context around that, because Oliver, you and I shared the same thing here. How do you bring it to the conversation of a relationship when your spending habits are different?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, there you go.
Money is the number one cause of divorce.
Exactly.
I can tell you how not to do it as well.
Hey.
One of the things that we do as a part of our business is every year we facilitate a couples goal setting retreat.
Went to it last year, actually.
Yeah. As leaders, as ambitious professionals, we have goals. But we know in business, you don't succeed alone. You succeed with a team. Yet we then immediately turn to our personal life, which is more important than the business. And we do not involve the people that matter most to us. Because most couples, one person is a goal setter and one person is not. Rarely are both goal setters. That's unique. I'll tell you how not to do it first. Shoving it down their throat.
Really?
I used to, I misinterpreted that when my wife said, I do, that did not apply to, I give you permission to be my accountability partner. I did not receive that permission. She does not want me to be her accountability partner. And so for years, I would just show her the spending, and it almost made her a victim. I made money in unsafe conversation in our home.
It's huge.
If I brought up budget or spending or money, immediately it would trigger fear in my wife, because I'm also a fairly intense person and she's a very sensitive person. Those two things do not go well together in that context. So here's what I learned how to do. I have to meet people where they are at versus where I think they ought to be.
Bring it right back.
I had to understand what's in it for my wife. And when she was talking about, like, this year is the first year that she's been excited about having budget conversations. You know why?
That's awesome.
Because talking about a budget without talking about what you're going to get just feels like a deficit.
Yeah.
And what I started with is, what would make this year extraordinary for you? I want to renovate the house. I want to go on these trips. I want to buy these things. And it was hard for me to bite my tongue and be like, are you freaking nuts?
Oh, you and me both, my friend.
Right? But I put it down on paper and I bit my tongue and I asked her, if we could only do one, what's most important? Awesome. What would be second? What would be third? What would be fourth? And then I just let a month go by. And I helped her see, when I showed her the numbers of what we spent, and I just asked her, zero judgment, how do you feel about it? She's like, I think that was high. I go, I felt the same thing. And as we looked at where the money went, I said, did we actually get the value from this? Did we get the ROI? Or what would have happened if we would have said no to eating out that many times? Or no to that trip that we took that ultimately wasn't that great. We kind of mailed it in. And we could have freed it up to do that. She's like, oh, I would have way rather have done that. And so now it's about, honey, you want to get the floors done and the carpet done and the interior of the house painted. Here's how much that's going to cost. So every month that we're X dollars over, you have to understand it's going to punt that from happening another 6 months. Or we could say no to these things and have that. Which would you rather do? So it became about helping her articulate what she wanted to say yes to. Saying no is hard.
Yeah.
Saying, if you're clear on what you want to say yes to, however, it gets a lot easier. And that all started just because every year for the last 5-6 years, we've now sat down and had a couples goal setting retreat where What are my goals? What are her goals? What are our shared goals? And not that they're the same, but how do we actually start to support one another?
I love, Geoff, that you shifted from the shove it down your throat mentality to let me hear you out completely. Let me understand your desires. And then over time, let me just bring awareness to the conversation. Here's where we are.
Yeah.
Let the conclusions come of themselves.
And if you are listening to this going, I'm not wired that way, I'm not either.
Yeah.
I'm not either. I'm a driver. I walk in, I tell you what the goals are. I tell you the plan. I hold the team accountable. That's how I'm wired. But that's succeeding around people, not through people. People have to see their goals by being inside your world. Otherwise, they leave you personally or professionally.
That's succeed. I just have to repeat what you just said again. Succeeding around people versus through people.
Yeah.
Powerful.
And in a relationship, you can either bulldoze people or drag them around like an anvil.
Yeah.
Versus actually getting in the boat together and rowing at the same time.
Hilarious you say that. We had a camping trip the other week and we're canoeing, and Christina's like, my fiance, she's like, this is awfully like a relationship. Imagine if we could canoe like the rest of our life, where we're just doing it at the same time. We're in the same boat. And I'm like, that was really deep in a simple way.
So what you're saying, honey, is that I'm right and you finally realize that. Good. Thank you.
It's always what it is.
Love it. Amazing just direction of the conversation around relationships. I feel like this is such a taboo topic around money and relationships that so many people don't talk about, especially in the world of entrepreneurship and high performers, where it's all about the goal and making the money. I feel like so many people don't talk about, one, keeping it, and then how to sustain a lifestyle with it, and then how to sustain a lifestyle in a relationship with it.
Well, social media has not helped. I mean, it's funny when I don't go on social media often, but when I do, the number of posts that get served up to me about like entrepreneurship and this young person stepping on a jet. I'm like, they don't own that jet. They paid a lot of money to have a film crew, have them walk up to somebody else's jet. That's not what reality is, because I actually have partners that could afford their own jets.
Yeah.
They don't have them.
Yeah.
You want to actually look at real wealthy people. When you see people that you think are wealthy, what you see are people who are rich, who had a lot of money. And all you know when you see that car is that they're $100,000 poorer. Wealth is what you don't see, not what you do see. And if you want to actually talk to business owners who have built wealth, they're frugal. And every dollar in your business should do one of two things: get you a new customer or keep a customer you've already got. It's not the fancy office space. It's not the fancy desk and equipment. It's to get a customer or keep the customer you've got. And you look at their personal lives. I mean, gosh, Gary, when he was building Keller Williams, had a beat up Ford Taurus. And the board was like, dude, you need to get a luxury car. You're trying to attract these high performing agents into your world, saying, come to our world. You can be a millionaire and you too can ride in a beat up Ford Taurus. And he said, I refuse, because he knew a car was a depreciating asset. And the board finally bought him a Lexus. But I've sat in a class where he asked a woman for her shoe, and he held it up and it had a red sole on the bottom. Which for women who are listening, if they know what that means, it means it's a very expensive shoe. And he said, imagine that you wanted this shoe. It had a matching pair, great condition, and it's your size or your significant other size. And I want to sell it to you for $10. Will you buy it? And all the women go, oh yeah. And he's like, how about $50? Oh yeah. How about $100? Oh yeah. How about $5,000? No. He said that right there is the difference between wealthy people and people who are not wealthy. Most people have mastered the value of liabilities, things that take money out of your pocket. Wealthy people have mastered the value of assets, things that put money in your pocket. Care less about if that shirt or that pair of sneakers or whatever material possession, if that's a good deal, and start mastering something like real estate. Start mastering something like business. Start mastering something like stocks.
Huge.
Focus on mastering things that appreciate in value instead of depreciate.
Love it.
That applies to your personal life as well.
Huge. Amazing, Geoff. I'd love to, as we come to a close here, I'd love to ask you a final.
We haven't even jump roped yet.
We haven't even jump roped.
I gotta go buy one at the dollar store first, but I feel like that'd be insulting if I buy a dollar store one. I don't know.
About half of my employees went and bought jump ropes.
That's great. That's the influence of a great leader. I get
you too. You're a great leader. You too can learn to jump rope. There you go.
So we thought of this question beforehand. We wanted to ask you a question that you might not have gotten before. And we wanted to make it specific to the one thing. But, a lot of what you talk about in the one thing is around, the 7 pillars of your life. So I'm not going to go into all of them. If you want to know what they are, we'll include all the links.
Well, that was page 114. We already covered it. Spirituality, physical health, personal life, key relationships, job, business, finance. Put that on 0.5 speed and rewind. There you go.
Done. So the question we wanted to ask you is, there's a lot of, chaos in the world right now, with this pandemic and financial crises, and a lot of stuff is going on in the external world that can seem like, chaos and problems and things like that. I wanted to ask you, Geoff, in your perspective, in your opinion, what would you say is the one thing for humanity to embody or implement or create in order to shift, humanity in a way that is, more empowering, filled with more peace, filled with more, support for people? So big question, but how would you apply the one thing into humanity?
First thing that comes to my mind is the idea of leadership. What do you think the job of a leader is?
I would say to, really inspire other people to be leaders and to show up.
Cool. Oliver?
I'm definitely in resonance with that.
What's the job of a leader?
Quickest thing that comes to mind is to remove obstacles for others to achieve their desires.
Okay. Here's a perfect example of how Gary can say really simple things that make you go, damn. The job of a leader is to teach people how to think.
Think about interesting.
The job of a leader is to teach people how to think. Because if you can teach people how to think the way they need to think, they can get what they want to have when they want to have it. So if we talk about humanity and the future and transformation, like, it really comes down to leadership, and it comes down to every person feeling a sense of accountability and ownership to teach other people how to think, which, if they have to teach other people how to think, what do they have to do first?
Learn to think.
Teach themselves how to think, which means they have to evolve the person they need to become. They have to fundamentally ask, who's the person that I need to become to show up at the highest level, so I cast a certain shadow, so I can teach people how to think the way that they need to think, so that they can then teach the next person how to think, and that person can teach that person how to think.
Love that. It actually resonates for me in this other line that came to me years ago, which is the best thing you can do for the world is become the best version of yourself.
There you go.
There you go. I'm just, one of the things you said, Geoff, in Justin McDonald's podcast is, like, when you hear one of those simple things, it's almost like sipping on wine. You don't notice until after you've already sipped on it. And I'm here sipping on what you just said, and I'm starting to have that same experience of, like, that was really profound.
That's what I call a Gary experience. He'll say something that is so simple, and you're like, yeah, what?
We need to have like a little Gary sort of pill drug and take that, and that's kind of what it is, basically, right there. That's the hit. Awesome. So coming off to again towards the end of our podcast, one of the last things we'd love to ask is basically for you, for the one thing, or really something that was interesting is I looked up, the onething.com, and it takes me to productive now. Used to be the one thing. So I'm super curious now, as a final question, what's next, right? What's next for you? What's next for the one thing / productive now?
We're in the business of time. It's our most valuable resource. The problem is most people are spending it. They're not investing it. They don't look at their time like it's their most valuable resource. They do not invest it like their dollars and hold it accountable to delivering a return, which is why every team feels like they have too much to do and not enough time. So for us, everything we do is about how do we help leaders transform their teams from being busy to being productive, so they actually accomplish what matters most professionally and personally. So the future is about scaling that. How do we truly create a world where it is now normalized in our society that you wake up and you invest your time and hold it accountable to delivering a return, rather than spending it going from email to meetings to yes, if somebody asks if you've got a minute. And no longer is it acceptable to, at the end of the day, think, I was busy, but what did I get done? You wake up, you have clarity on what matters most, you invest that time, you hold it accountable to delivering a return, and you shut it down at a pre-prescribed time so you go and you live an extraordinary life.
Love it. Amazing. Yeah. Did you say drop the mic?
Drop the mic. Unfortunately, now all our mics are attached to these
And
things.
here's another example of thinking bigger. When Gary, Jane, and I sat down and he said, what should the name of the company be? Jane and I talked about it and we came back, we're like, we think it should be the one thing. And Gary said, you're thinking too small. You're saying that because that's the book that you have right now. But what happens when we write the next book and the next book and the next book? You need a brand that's bigger than the one thing that can encompass the one thing.
There you go.
And that's what became productive.
Very cool. Is there any reason why there's a K in the instead of a? Okay, please hit me.
Capital K for Keller, capital P and productive for Papasan.
Well played.
Love
it.
You can't trademark it with a C.
That's what I was kidding.
There was definitely that, but I'm like, there's got to be something innovative in here. There's no way it's just that.
Yeah, that's right.
Amazing. Well, hey, we're at the end here. I wish we could keep going. I'm sure you hear that every time. And yeah, we really, really appreciate so much of the wisdom you've shared. One of the things that even I've learned just as a speaker is your ability to kind of really accelerate and slow down, and your methodical ability to really let an idea land by really slowing down. And like I said in the beginning, you basically slow your voice and tone and speed of speaking to the speed of wisdom. And it just becomes more wise just in that speaking. So commend you for that.
You know where I learned that?
Probably.
You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. One of my first mentors, his name's Gene McNaughton. He was Tony Robbins' executive VP of sales. Tony trained him to speak. He trained me.
Cool. I love that.
Very cool. Yeah. So other than that, what's the best way for people to find you, to find productive, the one thing, all the things? Yeah.
So the website is theonething.com, and that's with the number one. So the number one thing.com. You can
not like the board in your background right now.
Yeah, exactly. You can learn about the podcast, the couples goal setting retreat, how we help companies. All of that is on that site. If you want to Google Geoff Woods, Geoff, Jeff with a G, I am the highest ranking Geoff Woods on Google. I feel really important.
There's a lot of those.
That's a good ego boost.
There you go. Congratulations.
All right. And any final words, David and Geoff as well for you? I would love to open the mic for you if you have any final words that you'd like to share with our Beyond the Peakers.
I do. Well. We've been going for about an hour. Yeah. So you get to decide if that last hour was an expense or an investment.
Yeah.
Oof.
And that will be determined on your ability to identify one thing that you will actually put into action.
Go.
If you do anything more, it's extra credit, but it's an investment when you take one thing and put it into action. So based on everything that we've talked about today, what's the one thing you can do? Such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary.
Love it. I already have some ideas of what mine is, but I'm going to go back and review this. And
I will say, if you have a significant other and you guys are not on the same page, I would check that event out.
That's what the one I'm pretty sure is the one thing that I'm going to.
Honestly, man, it's a game changer. It's one of the best things we do.
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome, Geoff. Well, thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure to have you. So much wisdom here. And I just appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.